My hands were shaking as I pushed open that forbidden door. My husband had never let me visit his family's beach house since we got married 38 years ago. He always made up excuses, always kept me away from this place with lies wrapped in smiles. But today he was on a business trip, or so I thought, and I had driven the 4 hours alone to the coast, determined to discover what on earth he was hiding on this property. I walked into the master bedroom with my heart pounding against my ribs, pushed open the carved wooden door, and when my eyes landed on what was inside, my entire body froze. I couldn't move a single muscle. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't process what I was seeing. What was right in front of me destroyed 38 years of marriage in a single second. Everything I had believed in, everything I thought was my life, had just exploded into 1,000 pieces. But so you can understand the magnitude of what I discovered in that room, I need to take you back to the beginning. I need to tell you how I got here. How a 63-year-old woman who thought she had her life figured out ended up standing in front of the most devastating proof that everything, absolutely everything, had been a lie. My name is Elizabeth, and until exactly 6 hours ago, I thought I knew every corner of my life. I believed my marriage to William was solid as a rock, that my husband was an honest, hard-working, and devoted man. We lived in a modest house in the suburbs, nothing fancy, but comfortable, built with the money we both earned over decades of work. I was an elementary school teacher until I retired 2 years ago, and he still works as a CPA at a mid-sized firm. Our life was simple, predictable, quiet. We had breakfast together every morning, ate dinner watching the news, and took walks in the park on Sundays. He brought me flowers every Friday without fail, remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every detail that mattered. He was the kind of husband any woman of my generation would consider an absolute blessing. We never had children. We tried for years, but it didn't happen. And eventually, we accepted that it would just be the two of us. William said I was enough for him, that he didn't need anything else in this world. He would hold my hand while we watched movies, hug me from behind while I was cooking, whisper sweet words to me before sleep. We were that older couple people see in the park and think that true love actually exists. And I believed it. My God, did I believe it. But there was one single thing in our marriage that was always out of my reach. One single thing that William protected with an almost fanatical zeal: the beach house. That damned beach house he inherited from his father 25 years ago, and that he never, in all these years, allowed me to visit. Not even once. Not even to see it from afar. Not even to spend a weekend. Nothing. I remember perfectly the day he told me about it for the first time. We were sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee, barely 2 weeks after his father's funeral. William told me with a sad expression that the old man had left him the family house on the coast, but that it was in deplorable condition. According to him, the walls had huge cracks, the roof was leaking everywhere, and there was mold in every corner. He told me it was dangerous to go in there, that it could collapse at any moment. He promised me that one day we would fix it up, that we would turn it into our retirement sanctuary. But first, we needed to save money for the necessary renovations. Years passed, and the house remained a forbidden subject. Every time I mentioned visiting it, even if it was just to see the ocean, William got nervous. He would change the subject. He made up excuses. He said he had too much work, that it wasn't a good time, that the highway was in bad shape, that it was too hot or too cold. There was always a reason not to go. And I, like the trusting and understanding wife I was for decades, accepted his explanations without questioning them too much. Because I trusted him. Because he had never given me reasons to doubt. But 3 months ago, something changed. Small things. Details so subtle that at first, I didn't even register them as red flags. William started traveling for work more often. Before, he went out once every 2 months. Now he was leaving every 2 weeks. Trips of 3, 4, even 5 days. Always to the same coastal city. Always with the same excuse of important audits for big clients. He would come back tanned, relaxed, with a sparkle in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. I would ask him how work was, and he would respond with vague, generic answers, without specific details. I started noticing other things too. Phone calls he would cut abruptly when I entered the room. Text messages he read with a strange smile and then deleted immediately. Once, I found a receipt in his pants pocket while I was doing the laundry. It was from an expensive restaurant on the coast, dated from his last trip. The total was $230 for 2 people. Expensive wine and dishes that I knew William didn't like. When I asked him about it, he told me it had been a business dinner with a demanding client. I accepted the explanation, but something in my stomach twisted uncomfortably. The Friday flowers started arriving less frequently. Then they stopped coming altogether. The Sunday walks became sporadic. Conversations during dinner were reduced to one-word answers. William was there physically, sitting across from me at the table, lying next to me in bed, but his mind was somewhere else, with someone else, in some other place. I could feel it in my bones, but I didn't have proof. Just that horrible feeling that the man with whom I had shared almost 4 decades was drifting away from me, and I didn't understand why. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning, exactly 2 weeks ago. William had already left for work, and I was watering the plants in the garden when the house phone rang. A man with a professional voice introduced himself as Matthew, a lawyer specializing in real estate and estates. He told me he needed to speak with William urgently about the coastal property he had inherited from his father. He said there were irregularities in the documents, that they needed to update information, that it was a delicate matter requiring immediate attention. I asked him what kind of irregularities he was talking about. There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end. Then Matthew told me something that froze my blood. He asked if I knew that the property had been completely renovated 5 years ago, that more than $200,000 had been spent on luxury renovations, that it was now one of the most valuable houses on the entire coast. I was left speechless. $200,000. Luxury renovations. William had told me for 25 years that the house was falling to pieces, that we didn't have money to fix it, that it was a project for the distant future. Where had he gotten $200,000? Why had he never told me anything? Why did he keep lying to me about the condition of that property? I gave the lawyer William's cell phone number and hung up with shaking hands. I sat on the living room sofa, staring into nothingness, trying to process what I had just heard. My mind was racing a mile a minute, connecting dots that previously seemed isolated. The frequent trips to the coast, the tan, the secret calls, the expensive restaurant receipts, the lies about the state of the house. Everything was starting to form an image I was terrified to contemplate. That night, when William came home from work, I acted normal. I served him dinner, asked about his day, smiled at the appropriate moments. But inside, I was burning with doubts, fears, and questions I didn't dare ask out loud. I waited for him to shower, and then, with my heart beating in my throat, I checked his phone while he was in the bathroom. I needed to find something. Anything that explained what was happening. I didn't find compromising messages. I didn't find suspicious photos. William was too careful for that. But I did find something interesting in his mobile banking app. Automatic monthly transfers of $1,500 to an account I didn't know. They had been going on for years. Thousands and thousands of dollars leaving our family economy without me knowing. How was it possible that I hadn't realized before? I closed the phone, just as I heard William turn off the water. I put it back exactly where it was, my hands shaking so much I almost dropped it. I got into bed and pretended to be asleep when he came out of the bathroom. That night I couldn't close my eyes for a single second. I lay there, listening to his steady breathing, wondering how he could sleep so deeply while I was drowning in a sea of lies. The next morning, William announced during breakfast that he had another work trip. 5 days this time. He was leaving Thursday and coming back Tuesday. The same coastal city as always, the same excuse of important audits. But this time, when he told me, I noticed something different in his expression, a kind of contained excitement, as if he was anxious to leave, as if he was counting the hours to get away from me and return to that mysterious place I wasn't allowed to know. I smiled at him and said it was no problem, that I would take the opportunity to visit my sister. A lie. I had no intention of visiting anyone, because at that moment, while I watched him drink his coffee with that barely disguised look of anticipation, I made a decision I never thought I would take in 38 years of marriage. I was going to follow him. I was going to find out what the hell he was hiding in that beach house. I was going to break the only unbreakable rule of our marriage and enter that forbidden place. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I searched his drawers when he left for work. I checked every document, every paper, every single thing that could give me information. I found old invoices hidden at the bottom of his desk. Invoices for construction materials, expensive furniture, luxury appliances, all addressed to the beach house. I found receipts from women's clothing stores, expensive dresses, designer shoes, perfumes that cost more than $300 a bottle. None of that was for me. I had never received gifts like that. My clothes came from department stores on sale. My shoes lasted years because I bought the cheapest ones. So, who were these things for? On Thursday morning, William said goodbye to me with a kiss on the forehead. He told me he loved me, that he would miss me, that he would call me every night. I kissed him back and wished him a good trip, with a smile that took all my willpower to sustain. I watched him get into the car and drive away down the street. I waited exactly 1 hour. Then I got into my own car, programmed the beach house address into the GPS, and drove toward the coast with my stomach in a knot. It was 4 hours on the road, 4 hours where my mind didn't stop imagining scenarios, each one worse than the last. Did William have a lover? Was someone living in that house? Why had he spent so much money on a place that was supposedly in ruins? How long had he been lying to me? The landscape changed around me, from city to countryside, from countryside to coast, but I barely registered it. I was trapped in my own head, in that whirlwind of doubts that was driving me crazy. I arrived at the coastal town around 2 in the afternoon. It was a beautiful place, with elegant houses facing the ocean, clean streets lined with palm trees, restaurants with terraces overlooking the beach. I followed the GPS directions until I found myself in front of a wrought iron gate protecting an immense property. The number matched the address I had found in the documents. This was the house. The famous ruined house William had talked about for 25 years. But there were no ruins here. No cracked walls or leaking roofs. In front of me stood a 2-story mansion, painted ivory, with huge windows reflecting the midday sun. The lawns were impeccable, with bright green grass and vibrant, colorful flowers. There was a fountain in the center of the front garden, with crystal-clear water cascading down. 3 cars were parked in the driveway. Expensive, modern, luxury cars. One of them was William's. My breath caught. He was there, inside that mansion. Right at this moment, after telling me he was coming to work, to do boring audits, to spend days locked in gray offices. He was in this paradise house, surrounded by luxury, living a life I didn't know. I parked my car half a block away, hidden behind a large tree. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just ring the doorbell. I couldn't confront him without knowing what was really going on. I needed information first. I needed to understand the magnitude of his lies before acting. I sat there for almost an hour, watching the house, waiting to see something, anything that would give me a clue. And then it happened. The front door opened, and William walked out, but he wasn't alone. Walking beside him was a woman in her mid-40s, slim, elegant, with long, wavy hair falling over her shoulders. She was wearing a coral-colored dress that reached her knees and high-heeled sandals. William had his arm around her waist. The way he looked at her, the way he smiled, the way he leaned in to kiss her cheek before she got into one of the cars, split my soul in two. She wasn't just an occasional lover, she wasn't a one-night mistake. The way they moved together, the comfort between them, the familiarity, everything screamed years of intimacy, years of shared life, years of lies. The woman drove off in her car, and William went back inside the house. I stayed there paralyzed, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Tears began to roll down my cheeks, uncontrollable. 38 years of marriage, and he had a complete other life 4 hours away. Another house. Another woman. What else? Other children? Another entire family I didn't know about? I don't know how long I spent there crying. It could have been minutes or hours. But eventually, the tears dried up, and something else replaced them. Rage. A cold, calculating rage that burned me from the inside. I wasn't going to leave. I wasn't going to run away like a coward. Not after having come this far. I needed to see more. I needed to know everything. I waited until it got dark. The lights in the house turned on one by one, illuminating the windows like a beacon in the night. I could see shadows moving inside, William walking back and forth, preparing something in what looked to be the kitchen, living his secret life as if nothing was wrong. I got out of the car carefully, making sure no one saw me. I walked close to the wall of the neighboring property until I reached the back of the mansion. There was a service door there, semi-hidden among the bushes. I tried the knob. It was locked, of course, but there was a window next to it, barely ajar. It was small, but I could fit. I can't believe I did it. Me, Elizabeth, a 63-year-old retired teacher, climbing through a window like a thief in the night. But desperation makes you do unthinkable things. I pulled myself up with a strength I didn't know I had, squeezed my body through that narrow space, and fell on the other side with a dull thud that knocked the wind out of me. I lay motionless on the floor, listening, waiting to hear footsteps approaching, waiting for William to have heard me, but nothing happened. The house remained silent, except for the distant sound of a television on somewhere on the first floor. I stood up slowly, dusting off my clothes. I was in a laundry room. There was a luxury washer and dryer, shelves full of perfectly organized cleaning products, and an ironing board with carefully folded clothes. Everything spotless, everything expensive, everything part of this parallel life my husband had built behind my back. I opened the laundry room door carefully and peeked into a long hallway. I heard William's voice in the distance, talking on the phone with someone. His tone was relaxed, affectionate, nothing like the distant way he spoke to me lately. I took advantage of his distraction and went up the stairs to the second floor, stepping carefully so as not to make noise. The hallway upstairs had 4 doors, 3 were closed, 1 was ajar. I approached that one, with my heart beating so hard I thought my chest was going to explode. I pushed the door slowly, and that was when I entered the master bedroom. When I saw what was inside, when my world was completely destroyed. Laid out on the huge bed was a wine-colored silk dress with the price tag still hanging, $450. On the nightstand, framed in polished silver, was a photograph of William hugging the same woman I had seen leaving the house that afternoon. But it wasn't a recent photo. It was old, worn at the edges, as if someone had touched it 1,000 times with affection. In the image, both looked at least 20 years younger. He had darker hair, without the gray that now covered his temples. She was smiling with a happiness that pierced me like a knife. Behind them, this same house was visible, but under construction, with scaffolding and stacked materials. That photo was decades old. Decades. I walked toward the closet like I was in a trance, my legs shaking so much I thought I was going to fall. I opened the wooden doors, and what I saw took away the little air I had left. Rows and rows of women's clothing, dresses of every color except blue, silk blouses, designer pants, elegant coats, shoes organized on special shelves, dozens of pairs, all expensive, all brands I had only seen in magazines. On the vanity, there were French perfumes, luxury makeup, jewelry in velvet boxes, diamond earrings, pearl necklaces, gold bracelets shimmering under the soft light of the lamp. Someone lived here. She didn't just visit. She lived here. This was her house, her room, her life, and William was part of it. He had built all this. He had paid for all this. While I lived in a modest house, buying clothes on clearance, saving every penny, worrying about the electric bills, he was here, spending fortunes on another woman, building a palace for someone else. I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. I froze, hiding behind the closet door, my heart beating so fast I thought I was going to faint. The footsteps got closer. They stopped right outside the room. I held my breath. Please, don't let him come in. Please. But it wasn't William. It was a female voice. The woman in the coral dress had returned. I heard her enter the room, humming a song softly. She opened drawers, moved things, walked toward the connected bathroom. I heard water running. She was getting ready to shower. This was my chance. I slipped out of the closet carefully, pressed against the wall, moving like a ghost. I managed to get out of the room without her seeing me and went down the stairs as fast as I dared without making noise. I needed to get out of there. I needed to process what I had seen before they discovered me. But when I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. Scattered on the dining room table were documents. I approached, knowing I was taking a risk, knowing William could appear at any second. But I needed to see what those papers were. Bills. Utility bills in the name of Julia Miller. That was the woman's name, Julia. The bills had been coming to this address for 20 years. 20 damn years. I counted quickly in my head. That meant William had met this woman only 5 years after inheriting the house. Only 5 years of lying to me about the supposed ruins. There were more papers. Bank statements showing monthly deposits of $1,500. The same ones I had seen on his phone. Everything went to a joint account in the name of William and Julia. An account they managed together, like husband and wife, like partners, like a real family. I felt like I was going to throw up. I leaned against the table, trying to keep my balance, trying not to collapse right there. 20 years. He had been with this woman for 20 years, while swearing eternal love to me, while sleeping in my bed, while kissing me in the mornings, while building this monstrous lie that was now crumbling on top of my head. I heard voices approaching, William and Julia talking from somewhere in the house. They were coming toward the dining room. I didn't have time to leave the way I came in. I looked around desperately and saw a door under the stairs. I yanked it open and got inside just as their voices became clearer. It was a storage closet, small, dark, full of stacked boxes. I stayed there still, breathing as quietly as possible, listening to every word they said on the other side of the door. Julia's voice sounded soft, affectionate. She asked William if he had spoken to me, to his wife. He answered yes, that everything was under control, that I didn't suspect anything, that I was so naive I believed every excuse he invented. They laughed. Both of them laughed at me, at my trust, at my stupidity. Julia said something about the boys. The boys. I covered my mouth to keep from screaming. Did they have children? Did William have children with this woman? His voice confirmed my worst nightmare. He said Liam would come to visit them on the weekend, that he was excited to spend time at the beach house, that Noah would also arrive on Sunday with his girlfriend. 2 sons. He had 2 grown sons with this woman, and I knew nothing. They talked about plans for dinner, about a reservation at a restaurant facing the ocean, about the anniversary they would celebrate soon. 20 years together, Julia said with tenderness. 20 years of true love. William kissed her. I could hear the sound. I could picture the scene. And something inside me broke in a way I knew would never be repaired. They went toward the kitchen. I waited 5 minutes more. 10. 15. When I was sure they weren't nearby, I came out of the closet. My legs barely held me up. I had to get out of there before I did something stupid, before I ran out screaming and destroyed everything. Because that is what I wanted to do. I wanted to come out of that hiding place and confront them. I wanted to see their faces when they saw me there, when they realized their little secret had been discovered. But something stopped me. A cold and calculating voice in my head told me that waiting would be better, that I needed more information, that I needed solid proof, that if I was going to destroy William, I had to do it right. I slipped toward the exit. I went out through the same laundry room window. I ran toward my car, hidden in the shadows. I sat behind the wheel, shaking from head to toe, with silent tears rolling down my cheeks. I didn't sob. I cried in silence, with a sadness so deep it was drowning me. I drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I rented a room and locked myself in there. I threw myself on the hard, cheap bed, so different from that huge luxury bed William shared with Julia. I stared at the stained ceiling, listening to the traffic noise outside, feeling my 38-year life disintegrating piece by piece. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph. I saw that expensive dress on the bed. I saw those shining jewels. I heard their laughter mocking me. I heard the names of those sons I never met. Liam, Noah, sons that William had with another woman, while telling me it was okay that we didn't have our own, that I was enough for him. Lies. Everything had been lies from the beginning. The next morning, I went back to the house. But this time, I didn't go to hide. I went to investigate. I waited until I saw William leave in his car, probably to buy something or run an errand. Julia also left shortly after in her own vehicle. The house was empty. I entered through the laundry window again, this time with more confidence, with more determination. I knew exactly what I was looking for. Proof, documents, anything I could use later when I decided how to destroy the man who had lied to me for 2 decades. I checked every drawer of the desk in the first-floor study. I found bank statements showing obscene expenses, trips to Europe, very expensive jewelry, private school tuition for Liam and Noah, all paid for with money that should have been ours. With money from the inheritance William's father left for both of us, not just for him, with money he had systematically siphoned off toward this secret life. I found property deeds. The house was valued at $1,200,000. More than $1 million in real estate that supposedly didn't exist, that was supposedly uninhabitable ruins. I found photo albums hidden at the bottom of a closet, photos of William with Julia throughout the years, photos of their sons as babies, children, teenagers, adults, birthdays, Christmases, family vacations on exotic beaches. An entire life documented in images that broke my heart with every page I turned. And then I found something that made everything else seem insignificant. A diary. William's personal diary, hidden in a locked drawer. I forced the lock with a letter opener I found on the desk. I didn't care about breaking anything. Nothing mattered anymore. I opened the diary with shaking hands and began to read. The first pages were dated 23 years ago. William wrote about meeting Julia on a business trip to the coast. He described her beauty, her laugh, the way she made him feel alive in a way he hadn't experienced in years. He said that with me, everything had become routine, boredom, obligation. That Julia was passion, adventure, freedom. Every word was a stab directly to my heart. I kept reading, turning pages with fingers trembling with rage and pain. William wrote about the decision to maintain both lives. He said he couldn't leave me because I was his legal wife, because divorce would be complicated, because his family appreciated me and wouldn't understand. But he couldn't give up Julia either because she was his true love, so he decided to have both. Me for appearances, for social life, to meet expectations, Julia for love, for happiness, for real life. He wrote about Liam's birth 22 years ago. The emotion in his words was palpable. He described holding his son for the first time, the tears of joy he had shed, the promise he had made to be the best father possible, all while I was at home crying alone, believing we could never have children, accepting that loss as part of our destiny. Then came Noah, 3 years later. William wrote about his first steps, his first words, every achievement documented with a love he had never shown me. While I sank into depression over not being able to be a mother, he had 2 sons growing up just 4 hours away. The most recent pages were worse. William wrote about how tired he was of keeping up the charade with me. He said it was getting harder every day to fake affection, simulate interest, act like the devoted husband, that he couldn't stand touching me anymore, that my conversations bored him, that counting the days until his next trip to the coast was the only thing keeping him sane. He described me as a pathetic old woman clinging to a dead marriage. He said the only reason he hadn't left me yet was that he was waiting for the perfect moment so that he and Julia could be together publicly without consequences. I closed the diary and pressed it against my chest, bending over myself as silent sobs shook my body. It wasn't just that he had cheated on me. It wasn't just that he had built another family. It was that he despised me. He hated me. And he had been pretending to love me for decades, while inside, he felt disgusted by me. I don't know how long I sat there on the floor of that luxurious study, surrounded by evidence of my husband's lies, crying like I had never cried in my life. But eventually, the tears dried again, and the rage returned, stronger this time, purer, more focused. I got up from the floor, put the diary in my purse, took photos of all the important documents with my phone. Bank statements, deeds, bills, family photos, evidence. All the evidence I would need to destroy him legally. I left the house for the last time, making sure to leave everything exactly as I had found it. I didn't want them to know I had been there. Not yet. I needed time to plan, time to prepare my perfect revenge. I drove back home that same afternoon, 5 hours on the road where my mind worked nonstop, designing every step of what would come next. When I arrived at our modest house, at our fake life, I sat in the living room and waited. William called that night as always, with his fakely affectionate voice, asking me how my day had been. I told him about made-up things, about an imaginary visit to my sister, about the nice weather. I acted perfectly, just as he had been acting with me for 20 years. When we hung up, I searched the internet for divorce lawyers. I found Matthew, the same one who had called 2 weeks ago about the irregularities in the property. That wasn't a coincidence. I made an appointment for the following Monday. The days until Monday were torture. I kept acting normal when William returned from his supposed work trip. I welcomed him with a smile, asked him how it went, served him his favorite dinner. He hugged me and told me he had missed me, with that same mouth that had kissed Julia days ago, with those same hands that had caressed her skin. I wanted to throw up, but I kept my composure. Monday finally arrived. I told William I had a routine doctor's appointment and left the house early. I drove downtown and entered the elegant offices of the law firm. Matthew received me with professionalism. And when I told him the whole story, when I showed him the photos I had taken, when I gave him William's diary to read, I saw his expression go from neutral to absolutely outraged. He explained that what William had done wasn't just morally repugnant, but potentially criminal. He had diverted funds from an inheritance that legally had to be shared in the marriage. He had hidden assets worth more than $1 million. He had built an entire parallel estate using money that partially belonged to me. Depending on how we handled the case, he could face fraud charges in addition to the divorce. Matthew asked me what I wanted to do. If I wanted to proceed with discretion, or if I wanted to make this public, expose him completely. The answer came out of my mouth before I could think about it. I wanted to destroy him. I wanted everyone to know what kind of man he was. I wanted him to lose everything, just as I had lost 38 years of my life in a lie. The lawyer smiled. He told me we could do that we had more than enough evidence, but that we needed to be strategic, patient, calculating. We needed more direct proof. We needed witness testimonies. We needed to build a case so solid that William would have no possible escape. He suggested I go back to the beach house, talk to the neighbors, get someone to publicly confirm that William lived there with Julia, that they had children together, that they had been maintaining that relationship for decades. An outside testimony would validate everything I had discovered and make it impossible for William to deny anything. So that was exactly what I did. 3 days later, when William announced another work trip, I also packed my suitcase. This time, I would stay on the coast as long as necessary. This time I wouldn't hide. This time I would get every piece of evidence I was missing. I arrived at the coastal town at dusk. I rented the same cheap motel room and waited until the next morning to start my investigation. I walked through the elegant neighborhood where William's mansion was, observing the houses around me, looking for someone who could give me information. It was then that I saw her, a woman in her 70s, watering the plants in her garden at the house right next to William's. She was wearing a large hat to protect herself from the sun and had a kind smile on her face. I approached carefully, mentally rehearsing what I was going to say. "Good morning," I said with a trembling voice. She looked up and returned the greeting warmly. I introduced myself as Mary, inventing a fake name for precaution. I told her I was looking to buy a property in the area and that I loved this neighborhood. I asked if she knew the owners of the house next door, if they were good neighbors. The woman's expression lit up. "Oh, yes," she said enthusiastically. "William and Julia are wonderful. They've been living there for over 20 years. They are the most charming couple you'll meet. They have 2 beautiful sons, although they are grown up now and live in the city. But they come to visit often, especially on holidays." Every word was a hammer hitting my chest, but I kept smiling. I asked her more. How much time did William spend at the house? The neighbor, who told me her name was actually Barbara, replied that he came at least twice a month, sometimes more, that he stayed several days each time, that it was evident how much he loved Julia because he always arrived with flowers, gifts, beautiful details. I asked if she knew what he did for a living. Barbara said he was an accountant, that he worked in the city, but that his real home was here, with his family, that Julia always said they were lucky to have found true love, that not everyone had that fortune. I felt like I was going to drown with every word, but I kept asking. I needed more. I asked if she had ever seen William with another woman. Barbara shook her head emphatically. No, never. He is completely devoted to Julia. He never looks at anyone else. He is the kind of husband we all dream of. I thanked her for the information, made up an excuse about having to leave, and walked back to my car before she could see the tears starting to fall. I sat in the car and gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The neighbor had confirmed everything. 20 years of lies. 20 years of a perfectly orchestrated double life. William had built a complete family, an impeccable reputation in this town, an image of a devoted husband and loving father, all while I existed like a ghost in his other life, like an annoying obligation he had to endure between his visits to paradise. But there was something in what Barbara had said that gave me an idea. She mentioned that William and Julia celebrated their anniversary every year with a big party, that they invited all the neighbors, family, friends, that it was the event of the year in their social circle, and that this year would be special because they were celebrating exactly 20 years together. I took out my phone and called Matthew. I told him about the conversation with the neighbor, about the anniversary party coming up. I told him that was our perfect opportunity, the ideal moment to expose everything in front of everyone, to destroy the perfect image William had built so carefully. Matthew agreed. He told me he would get a court order to access William's shared bank accounts, that he would prepare all the necessary legal documentation. He suggested I talk to Barbara again, that I get her official testimony, that I convince her to help me. An eyewitness who could confirm William's constant presence in that house for 2 decades was pure gold for our case. I went back to Barbara's house that same afternoon. This time, I didn't lie. I knocked on her door with my heart beating in my throat, and when she opened it with that same warm smile, I told her the truth. I told her my real name was Elizabeth, that I was William's legal wife, that we had been married for 38 years, that I knew nothing about Julia, about the children, about this parallel life until 2 weeks ago. Barbara's expression changed from kind to horrified in a matter of seconds. She put a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide as plates. "It can't be," she whispered. "That's not possible. William never mentioned having another wife. Julia never spoke about him being married to anyone else." I showed her my ID. I showed her photos of my wedding to William 38 years ago. I showed her photos of us together through the decades. In our house, on vacations, at family celebrations. I showed her the diary where William confessed everything, where he described how he managed his 2 lives, where he spoke of me with contempt and of Julia with love. Barbara let herself fall into a chair in her garden, pale as a ghost. She read every page of the diary I showed her, and with every paragraph, her expression became more distraught. When she finished, she looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I am so sorry," she said. "I had no idea. If I had known, I would never have allowed this to continue. I would never have been kind to him knowing he was destroying another woman's life." I explained what I needed from her, an official testimony confirming that William lived here regularly, that he had a family here, that he presented himself as Julia's husband, that he had built this life for 20 years. Barbara accepted immediately. She told me she would do everything in her power to help me expose that liar. But she gave me more than her testimony. She gave me invaluable information. She told me the anniversary party would be in exactly 2 weeks, a Saturday night, that invitations had already been sent to more than 100 people, that it would be in the mansion's garden, with luxury catering, live music, extravagant decoration. She told me Julia had been planning this event for months, that she wanted it to be perfect because 20 years deserved a memorable celebration. Memorable it was going to be, without a doubt, but not in the way Julia imagined. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of my life. Matthew worked day and night preparing the legal case. He got access to William's bank accounts and discovered he had diverted more than $500,000 from our shared economy toward his life with Julia over 20 years. Money from his father's inheritance, money from our joint savings, money that legally belonged partially to me and that he had stolen systematically. He found deeds showing that William had put the mansion solely in his name, deliberately excluding my rights as a legal wife. He found life insurance policies where Julia appeared as the sole beneficiary, leaving me with nothing in case something happened to him. He found secret wills, offshore accounts, hidden investments, a complete financial empire built behind my back. Matthew also contacted a private investigator who got recent photos of William with Julia. Images of them kissing in restaurants, walking holding hands on the beach, hugging on the mansion's balcony. Irrefutable visual proof of their relationship. I, meanwhile, kept acting normal at home. William returned from his trip, and I welcomed him as always. I cooked his favorite meals. I smiled when he told me about his made-up workday. I lay next to him every night feeling disgust, but maintaining the perfect facade, because I knew that every passing day brought me closer to the moment of destroying him completely. 1 week before the party, I did something I never thought I would do. I hired a professional stylist. I bought myself an elegant emerald-colored dress, which cost me more than I had spent on clothes in the last 5 years. I got a complete beauty treatment. Hair, nails, professional makeup. If I was going to appear at that party, I was going to look flawless. I was going to show William, Julia, and all their guests that I wasn't the pathetic old woman he described in his diary, that I had dignity, that I had strength, that I wasn't going to crumble silently. Matthew prepared the final legal documents: divorce petition for adultery and fraud, freezing order for all shared bank accounts, request for equitable division of all assets, including the beach mansion, and most importantly, a civil lawsuit for emotional distress and misappropriation of marital funds. We were seeking compensation for the 20 years of deception, for the stolen money, for the suffering caused. We also coordinated with the local police. Matthew had contacts with the district attorney's office and managed to get them involved. If we could prove large-scale financial fraud, William could face criminal charges, besides losing everything in the divorce. The idea filled me with a dark satisfaction I had never felt. The day of the party arrived. It was a beautiful Saturday, with a clear sky and a gentle sea breeze. I got ready in my hotel room, taking my time with every detail. The dress fit me perfectly, highlighting a figure I had maintained well despite my 63 years. The professional makeup hid the dark circles from sleepless nights. The elegant hairstyle made me look sophisticated, powerful. I looked in the mirror and almost didn't recognize myself. I wasn't the submissive Elizabeth who had accepted excuses for decades. I wasn't the naive wife who believed every lie. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone ready for war. Matthew picked me up at 7 in the evening. He carried a thick folder with all the legal documents, all the evidence, all the photos. He was also accompanied by 2 plainclothes police officers. They would be witnesses to everything that happened, and if necessary, they would arrest William right there. Barbara was waiting for us outside her house. She had offered to accompany us, to be by my side when I confronted William. She took my hand when I got out of the car and squeezed my fingers affectionately. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "This is justice. This is the right thing." We walked toward the illuminated mansion. I could hear soft music floating in the air, laughter from the guests, the clinking of champagne glasses. The garden was transformed into an elegant paradise. Lights hung from the trees, tables decorated with white tablecloths, and fresh flower centerpieces extended throughout the space. Uniformed waiters circulated with trays of canapés and expensive drinks. More than 100 people dressed in designer clothes chatted animatedly, celebrating the eternal love of William and Julia. In the center of the garden, under an arch of white and lavender flowers, they stood. William wore an impeccable gray suit I had never seen him wear at home. Julia wore a long champagne-colored dress that shined under the lights, with her hair up in an elaborate style, expensive jewelry adorning her neck and wrists. They looked radiant, in love, perfect. I approached slowly, with Matthew on my right, Barbara on my left, and the officers discreetly behind. The guests began to notice my presence. Conversations gradually died down. People turned to look at me, confused by the appearance of an elegantly dressed stranger in the middle of their private celebration. William had his back turned, laughing at something Julia had just said. He hadn't seen me yet. I took one more step, then another, until I was just yards away. Julia saw me first. Her smile froze. She looked me up and down, clearly confused about who I was and what I was doing there. She touched William's arm, pointing at me with her gaze. He turned around. And when his eyes met mine, I saw the color drain completely from his face. "Elizabeth," William whispered, and his voice came out strangled, almost inaudible. He took a step back, as if my mere presence were a physical blow. His eyes went from me to Julia, from Julia to the guests, desperately calculating how much damage was already done, looking for some impossible exit from this nightmare that had just materialized in front of him. Julia looked at me with genuine confusion. "William, who is she?" she asked with a soft voice, still not understanding the magnitude of what was about to explode. Some guests had moved closer, curious, sensing that something dramatic was about to happen, but not knowing exactly what. I took another step forward. My voice came out clear, strong, amplified by 20 years of contained rage. "Hello, William. I'm sorry to interrupt your celebration, but I think it's time everyone here knew the truth." I turned toward Julia, looking her directly in the eye. "My name is Elizabeth. I am William's legal wife. We have been married for 38 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the birds dared to sing. Julia looked at me as if I had just spoken in a foreign language. "That is impossible," she finally said, her voice shaking. "William and I have been together for 20 years. He isn't married to anyone else. He is my husband." I took out our marriage certificate from my purse, the official document dated 38 years ago. I extended it to her. She took it with trembling hands. She read it once, twice, 3 times, as if the words were going to magically change. Her face went from confusion to horror in a matter of seconds. The guests started to murmur. The murmur grew until it became a roar of scandalized voices. William remained paralyzed, his mouth open but unable to articulate a word. His brain was clearly working a mile a minute, trying to find an explanation. A lie convincing enough to get out of this. But there was no exit. Not this time. Matthew stepped forward, introducing himself as my lawyer. He took the photos the investigator had taken out of his folder. Images of William with Julia kissing, hugging, living as a couple. He passed them among the guests who had gathered around. Every image provoked gasps of shock, exclamations of disbelief. Then he showed the bank statements. The transfers of hundreds of thousands of dollars from our shared accounts toward this secret life. The money he had used to build this mansion, to buy expensive clothes, jewelry, luxury cars, everything stolen from our marriage. Julia dropped the marriage certificate as if it burned. She turned toward William with tears rolling down her perfectly made-up cheeks. "Tell me this isn't real," she begged him. "Tell me she is lying. Tell me you and I are real." William finally found his voice. He tried to get close to Julia, but she backed away. "My love," he started, and the phrase made me nauseous. "I can explain. This isn't what it looks like. She and I, we. It's complicated." "There is nothing complicated," I interrupted him. "You have lied to me for 20 years. You have lied to her for 20 years. You have lived a double life, stealing money, time, dignity from me. You have built an entire family while promising me eternal love every night." Barbara stepped forward, validating my story. She confirmed in front of everyone that she had seen William arrive at this house regularly for 2 decades, that she knew him as Julia's devoted husband, as the loving father of Liam and Noah. Her testimony was the last piece we needed. One of the guests, an older man who was apparently a close friend of the couple, approached William with an expression of absolute disgust. "You are a monster," he spat at him. "How could you do this to 2 women? How could you lie like that for so long?" Other guests began to back away, shaking their heads with repugnance. Some approached Julia to console her while she sobbed, her champagne dress now stained with mascara-streaked tears. The perfect event she had planned for months had turned into her worst nightmare. William tried to speak again, looking for words that could fix the irreparable. "Elizabeth, please," he started, extending a hand to me. "We can talk about this in private. You don't have to do this here, in front of everyone." I laughed. A bitter, cold laugh, completely devoid of humor. "Private?" I repeated. "Like you've handled everything privately for 20 years? No. William, this needs to be public. You need to face the consequences of your actions, in front of everyone you deceived." Matthew took out the divorce papers. He handed them to William formally. "You are being sued for divorce on grounds of adultery and financial fraud," he announced loudly so everyone would hear. "You are also being criminally investigated for misappropriation of marital funds and concealment of assets. The charges could result in jail time, as well as the total loss of your assets." The words fell like bombs. William took the documents with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the pages without really reading anything. His face had gone from pale to ash gray. It looked like he was going to throw up or faint at any moment. Julia walked over unsteadily, snatching the papers. She read about the lawsuits, about the division of assets, about the mansion she might lose, about the money he would have to pay back. Her entire life, built on lies, was crumbling before her eyes. "The children!" she screamed suddenly, looking at William with renewed horror. "Liam and Noah, they don't know anything about this, do they? They thought you were just theirs. They thought our family was real." William didn't answer. He couldn't, because the answer was obvious. His sons, the sons I never had, the sons he had raised in secret, were about to discover that their father was a liar, a cheater, a complete fraud. As if the universe had listened, at that moment, two young men arrived in the garden. Liam and Noah, evidently arriving late to the celebration. They stopped dead seeing the scene. Their father destroyed, their mother crying, the guests murmuring, scandalized, a strange woman dressed elegantly standing in the middle of the chaos holding legal documents. "What is going on?" asked the older one, Liam, looking around confused. "Dad, Mom, what is happening here?" Julia ran toward them, hugging them while sobbing incoherently. The boys looked at their father looking for explanations. William opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "How do you explain to your children that their entire life has been a lie? That they have a stepmother they never met? That their father is a bigamist?" Matthew, with cold professionalism, explained the situation to them. I saw how their expressions changed from confusion to shock, horror to fury. The younger one, Noah, approached William with clenched fists. "You lied to us!" he screamed. "Our whole life was a lie." William raised his hands, trying to calm Noah, but the young man pushed him away forcefully. "Don't touch me," he spat with venom in every word. "Don't you dare touch me. All this time, everything you told us about family, about honesty, about being a good man, it was all trash. You aren't my father. You are a stranger." Liam, the older one, had a different expression, more calculating, less emotional. He looked around, assessing the situation, and then approached me. His eyes were the same as William's, and seeing him was like looking at a young version of the man who had betrayed me. "So you are his legal wife," he said to me, "the one who was first, the one he abandoned emotionally to be with my mother." I nodded. For 38 years I believed I had a real marriage. Turns out the last 20 were a complete sham while he built this life with you. Liam processed this in silence. Then he turned toward William with absolute coldness. "You know what this means, right? Legally, his marriage to her takes precedence. Everything you built here, everything you gave us, technically belongs partially to her. You could lose everything. We could lose everything." Julia let out a heartbreaking wail. "The house," she whispered. "Our savings. Everything is in your name, William. If she sues for division of assets, if she wins, we are left with nothing. 20 years of my life, 20 years building this home, and I could lose it because you never told me you had another wife." "Exactly," Matthew intervened. "According to the law, all assets acquired during the legal marriage belong to both spouses. This property, valued at $1,200,000, was purchased and renovated with marital funds. Mrs. Elizabeth has a legal right to half." The remaining guests watched the scene as if it were a live soap opera. Some had taken out their phones and were recording. Perfect. I wanted this to go viral. I wanted the whole world to see William's downfall. One of the police officers who had come with us finally approached. "Sir," he said, addressing William, "we need you to come with us to answer some questions about the financial irregularities that have been reported. You aren't being arrested at this moment, but your cooperation is required." William seemed to shrink. He looked around, looking for support, looking for someone to defend him, but he only found expressions of disgust and contempt. Even his own children had turned their backs on him. Julia was crying, surrounded by friends who consoled her while shooting murderous looks at him. "I can't believe I trusted you," I told him, and my voice came out calmer than I expected. 38 years, William. 38 years of my life, given to a man who never really existed. I asked myself every day what I had done wrong, why you were drifting away from me, why you didn't look at me with love anymore. I thought it was my fault, that I wasn't enough, that I had failed as a wife. I took the diary out of my purse. I held it up high for everyone to see, but then I found this. Your personal diary, where you describe exactly what you thought of me, where you call me pathetic, boring, an obligation, where you write that you can barely stand to touch me, that counting the days until returning here with Julia is the only thing keeping you sane. I opened the diary to a marked page and began to read aloud. Every day with Elizabeth is torture. Her conversation bores me to tears. Her aging skin repulses me. I close my eyes when I kiss her and think of Julia. I think of her youth, her beauty, the real life I have waiting for me on the coast. The gasps from the guests were audible. Julia covered her mouth with her hands, horrified not only by the betrayal toward me, but by the cruel words William had written. Even she seemed disgusted by the coldness with which he described his feelings. I kept reading. Sometimes I wonder how much longer I will have to keep up this charade. Elizabeth is so naive she believes every excuse I invent. It is almost too easy to fool her. Part of me despises her for being so dumb, for never questioning, for accepting everything without fighting. I closed the diary and looked William directly in the eye. That is what you really thought of me. And yet, every night you lay next to me and told me you loved me. Every anniversary, you gave me flowers and swore eternal devotion. What kind of monster does that? William finally found words. Elizabeth, I never wanted to hurt you. Things just happened. I met Julia and fell in love and didn't know how to handle it. I didn't want to hurt you with a divorce. I thought I could make both of you happy. You mean you thought you could have everything? I corrected him. A legal wife for appearances and a full-time mistress for your happiness. It was never about protecting me. It was about protecting yourself, having your cake and eating it too. Julia approached William, and for a moment I thought she was going to console him. But instead, she slapped him so hard it resonated throughout the silent garden. You lied to me too, she screamed at him. You told me you had never been married before. You told me I was your first and only true love. You made me raise our children, believing we had a legitimate family. And all this time you had another life, another woman waiting for you at home. Tears ran down her face, completely ruining her elaborate makeup. Her champagne dress was wrinkled from wringing her hands against the fabric. The perfect image of the perfect celebration was completely destroyed. Matthew took advantage of the moment to present more documents. Secret wills where William left everything to Julia, completely excluding me. Insurance policies where she was the sole beneficiary. Investments made in his name using money that legally belonged to me. Every paper was another stab, another betrayal, another lie exposed. The officers began to escort him toward the exit. William walked like a zombie, completely shattered. His perfect world collapsed around him. The guests parted as he passed. No one wanted to be near the man who had orchestrated such deception. Before they took him away, I approached one last time. I want you to know something, I told him in a low voice, but loud enough for those nearby to hear. I spent 20 years wondering what I had done wrong. 20 years blaming myself for your coldness, for your distance, for the slow death of our marriage. But now I understand it was never my fault. The monster was always you. He looked at me with glassy eyes, maybe looking for forgiveness, maybe looking for something of the submissive woman I used to be. But that woman had died. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who wasn't going to forgive, someone who was going to make sure he paid for every lie. The officers finally took him away. Julia collapsed into Barbara's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Her sons stood watching the scene, processing that their entire life would have to be re-examined now under this new and horrible light. I turned toward the remaining guests. I'm sorry to ruin your evening, I said with a calm that surprised even myself. But everyone deserved to know the truth about the man you were celebrating, about the lie you were participating in without knowing. Barbara took my arm. Let's go, she whispered. You already did what you came to do. You already got your justice. She was right. Matthew put all the documents back in his folder. We walked toward the exit, crossing the garden that minutes before had been the setting of a celebration of eternal love. Now it was just the site of absolute and deserved destruction. The following days were a whirlwind of legal activity. Matthew worked tirelessly preparing the case, accumulating more and more evidence. The recordings of the party had gone viral just as I expected. Thousands of people commented on social media, most expressing support for me and condemning William. Some local media outlets even covered the story. The betrayed wife who exposed her husband's double life became a news headline. William tried to contact me multiple times. Calls I rejected. Text messages begging for us to talk, to give him a chance to explain himself. I deleted them without reading. There was nothing he could say that would change what he had done. There was no explanation that justified 20 years of systemic lies. Julia also tried to reach out. Her messages were different. She wasn't looking for forgiveness, but answers. She wanted to know when exactly the deception had started. She wanted details about our life together. She wanted to understand how William had managed to maintain both lives without either one suspecting. I responded to her once, suggesting we meet. We needed to talk. The two women who had been victims of the same man. We met at a neutral coffee shop, halfway between the coast and the city. When I walked in, I saw her sitting at a table in the back, looking completely different from the elegant woman at the party. No makeup, hair up in a simple ponytail, dressed in jeans and a simple blouse. She looked exhausted, defeated, broken. I sat across from her. For a moment neither said anything. We just looked at each other. Two women separated by 20 years of age, but united by the same devastating betrayal. "I'm sorry," Julia finally said, and her voice sounded sincere. "I know that doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't fix the damage. But I need you to know that I didn't know. I would never have been with him if I had known he was married. I would never have raised my children in that lie." I believed her. I could see in her eyes that she was also a victim. William had manipulated both of us. He had lied to both of us. He had stolen years of our lives from both of us. "Tell me how you met him," I asked her. I needed to understand how this all started. Julia took a deep breath. "It was 23 years ago. I was working as a receptionist at a hotel on the coast. He arrived on business." "Oh, that's what he said." We started talking. He was charming, attentive, funny. He invited me to dinner, then to another dinner, and another. He told me he was single, that he lived alone in the city, that his work brought him to the coast frequently. He never mentioned he had a wife waiting for him at home. I listened while she narrated her story. How William courted her for months. How she eventually moved into the house he was renovating, the house he supposedly inherited from his father. How she got pregnant with Liam barely a year after meeting. How William proposed to her, although they never got married legally because he always made up excuses about pending paperwork, about papers he needed to gather. "Now I understand why we never got married officially," said Julia with bitterness. "He couldn't. He was already married to you. All this time I thought it was just a matter of paperwork, of bureaucracy. I never imagined the real reason was that he already had a legal wife." I told her my side of the story. How William had become distant exactly at the moment he met Julia. How he had started traveling constantly right when she got pregnant. How every piece of his double life fit perfectly when I finally saw the full picture. "He spent more than $500,000 on me and our children," said Julia, looking at her untouched coffee. "Money that belonged to you. Money he stole from your marriage to build ours. I feel dirty. I feel like a thief even though I never knew what was happening." "You aren't the thief," I told her firmly. "He is. He made conscious decisions every day for 20 years. He decided to lie to you. He decided to lie to me. He decided to steal our time, our money, our trust. The fault is completely his." We stayed silent for a moment. Then Julia asked what clearly had been tormenting her. "What are you going to do with the house?" "Matthew told me that legally you have a right to half. That is my house, where I raised my children, where I built my life. But it is also yours by right. You are going to take it from me." The question was valid. Legally, I could force her to sell the property and give me half the value, more than $600,000 that would partially compensate for the stolen years. But looking at this broken woman in front of me, mother of 2 sons who were also innocent in all this, I couldn't do it. "I'm not going to take your house," I finally told her. "But William is going to compensate me for every penny he stole. We are going to reach an agreement. He is going to pay from his personal account, from his savings, from wherever necessary. You and your children shouldn't suffer more than you already have." Julia started to cry. Tears of relief, gratitude, mixed pain. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't deserve your compassion, but thank you." Matthew didn't completely agree with my decision when I told him. He said I was being too generous, that I should take everything that legally corresponded to me. But I explained to him that this wasn't about the money, it was about justice. It was about making sure William paid, not Julia, not her innocent children. We reached a formal agreement. William would have to pay me $800,000 in compensation for the diverted funds and the years of deception. He would have to sell other properties he had, liquidate investments, use all his personal savings. Julia would keep the beach house, but William would lose any right to it. The divorce would proceed immediately, and he would lose all right to alimony or benefits from our marriage. Additionally, Matthew managed to get the district attorney to present formal charges for financial fraud. William would face a criminal trial. Depending on the verdict, he could spend up to 5 years in prison. The idea filled me with a dark satisfaction that I knew wasn't completely healthy, but I didn't care. He deserved to pay. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later. During that time, I moved into a new apartment in a neighborhood I had always liked but William said was too expensive. I used part of the preliminary settlement money to furnish the place exactly how I wanted. Colors I liked, comfortable furniture, art that made me happy. For the first time in decades, I lived in a space that was completely mine. Barbara became a close friend. She traveled from the coast to visit me. We drank coffee, talked for hours. She helped me process everything that had happened, to heal the wounds William had left. She constantly reminded me that I hadn't done anything wrong, that I deserved to be happy, that my life was just starting again. Julia and I also kept in contact, a strange friendship born of horrible circumstances, but real. We understood each other in a way no one else could. We had both loved the same man. We had both been betrayed by him. We were both rebuilding our lives from the ashes of his lies. The day of the trial finally arrived. The courtroom was full. Media, curious onlookers, people who had followed the viral story. I sat in the front row with Matthew by my side. Julia was on the other side of the room with Liam and Noah. The boys had decided to testify against their father, describing how his betrayal had affected them psychologically. William entered in handcuffs, looking haggard and aged. He had lost weight, had deep dark circles, his hair grayer than ever. He looked at me with pleading eyes, but I looked away. I didn't owe him even my gaze. The prosecutor presented the case meticulously. Every document, every bank transfer, every lie documented in William's diary. The statements clearly showed how he had systematically diverted marital funds for 20 years. More than $500,000 stolen from our shared economy to finance his parallel life. The jury listened with increasingly scandalized expressions. Matthew called me to the stand as the main witness. With a firm voice, I narrated 38 years of marriage. I described how William had changed exactly when he met Julia, how the trips multiplied, how money disappeared without reasonable explanation, how I trusted so much that I never questioned, never investigated, never suspected the magnitude of his betrayal. Julia also testified. She spoke about how William had lied to her from the beginning, hiding his marriage to me, how he had manipulated her to create a family while keeping another in secret. Her testimony was devastating because it made clear that William had deliberately deceived 2 women for 2 decades. Liam and Noah took the stand with expressions of pain and fury. Liam spoke about discovering his entire life was a lie, that his father wasn't the honorable man he pretended to be, but a calculating manipulator. Noah described the psychological trauma of finding out like that, in front of 100 people, that his family was fake. Both made it clear they had completely cut communication with William and didn't plan to forgive him ever. William's defense lawyer tried to argue there was no criminal intent, that he was simply a man who had fallen in love and handled a situation poorly. But the prosecutor destroyed that argument easily. He showed the diary where William coldly calculated every move, where he planned how to hide money, where he consciously manipulated both women. There was nothing accidental about his actions. Everything had been premeditated and executed with precision for 20 years. The trial lasted 4 days. When the jury retired to deliberate, I left the building to get some air. Barbara was waiting for me outside with hot coffee. She hugged me without saying anything, simply offering her comforting presence. The jury returned after barely 3 hours. Guilty of financial fraud, guilty of concealment of assets, guilty of misappropriation of marital funds. Every verdict was another nail in the coffin of the life William had built. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison and complete restitution of all diverted funds. In addition to the $800,000 he already owed me by agreement, he would have to pay an additional $200,000 in fines to the state. William collapsed in his chair when he heard the sentence. His lawyers tried to console him, but he just stared into the void, finally comprehending the magnitude of what he had lost. I left the court feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness exactly, because the damage was too deep for that, but peace. Justice had been served. The man who had stolen 20 years of my life was going to pay for it. Julia was waiting for me outside. We hugged. 2 women who had survived the same hell. "We're going to be okay," she whispered. "We are both going to be okay." And she was right. The following months were of gradual healing. I used the restitution money to travel, something I had never done. I visited Spain, Italy, France, all the places I had dreamed of, but William always said were too expensive. I met new people. I tried exotic food. I lived experiences that had been out of my reach during decades of restrictive marriage. Julia decided to transform the beach house. She turned it into a retreat center for women survivors of abusive and deceitful relationships, a place where they could heal, rebuild, find their strength. She invited me to the grand opening, and when I arrived, I saw she had named the center in my honor, Elizabeth Healing Center. I cried when I saw the plaque at the entrance. I volunteered there regularly. I shared my story with other women who had been betrayed, manipulated, cheated on. I showed them it was possible to survive, that it was possible to rebuild, that life didn't end when you discovered everything had been a lie. Liam and Noah visited the center sometimes. They had started therapy to process the trauma of discovering the truth about their father. Slowly, they were healing, creating new definitions of family that didn't include William. They treated me with respect and affection, almost like an honorary aunt. The irony of developing a relationship with the stepsons I never knew I had didn't escape me. 1 year after the trial, I received a letter from William from prison. I held it in my hands for days without opening it. Finally, curiosity won, and I read it. It was a long, detailed apology, full of regret. He said he had had a lot of time to think, to understand the magnitude of his betrayal, that he hated himself for what he had done to Julia and me, that if he could turn back time, he would do everything differently. But he couldn't turn back time. That was reality. I folded the letter carefully. I put it in a drawer and never took it out again. I didn't answer him. There was nothing to say. His regret didn't give back the stolen years. It didn't cure the pain caused. It was too little, too late. On the 2nd anniversary of that night, I entered the beach house. Barbara, Julia, and I met for dinner. We toasted not to what we had lost, but to what we had gained: strength, wisdom, unexpected friendship born of horrible circumstances, freedom from a man who had kept us chained with lies. Julia raised her glass. "To surviving," she said with tears in her eyes. "To rebuilding. To becoming women who will never be victims again." Barbara added, "To the friendship born of pain. To supporting each other when the world was crumbling." I closed. "To the truth, even if it hurts. To justice, even if it takes time to arrive. To the life that begins when you finally break the chains." We clinked glasses and drank. And for the first time in 2 years, I smiled genuinely because I had survived, because I had fought, because I had won. William lost everything: his freedom, his money, his family, his reputation. He would spend years in prison reflecting on the decisions that destroyed multiple lives. And when he got out, he would have nothing waiting for him. No woman, no son, no home, only the consequences of his own actions. Meanwhile, I had a beautiful apartment. I had true friends. I had purpose helping other women heal. I had freedom to travel, to dream, to live without the ties of a fake marriage. At 65, I was starting the life I should have always had. I stand in front of the mirror every morning and see a different woman. Not the submissive wife who accepted everything without questioning. Not the broken victim who discovered the betrayal. But someone new, someone strong, someone who survived the unthinkable and came out the other side more powerful. And if I could speak to that Elizabeth, who walked trembling into that beach house 2 years ago, I would tell her this. The truth is going to destroy you. It's going to break everything you thought you knew about your life. But on the other side of that pain is something better. Freedom, dignity, justice. It will be worth it. I promise you, it will be worth it. Because in the end, the best revenge wasn't destroying William. It was rebuilding myself. It was turning pain into purpose. It was transforming betrayal into triumph. It was living well, living free, living happy. While he lost everything in a prison cell. And now, every time someone asks me my story, I tell it without shame. Because there is no shame in being deceived by someone expert at lying. The shame belongs only to the one who lies, the one who betrays, the one who destroys lives out of selfishness. I just survived. And surviving when the world collapses is the bravest act of all. If you are going through something similar, if you discovered your life was a lie, if you feel you can't survive this, let me tell you something. Yes, you can. You are going to survive. You are going to heal. You are going to be stronger than you ever imagined possible. Justice will come. And on the other side of this hell, a better life awaits you than the one you left behind. That is what I learned when I opened that forbidden door. That the truth sets you free, even if it destroys you first. And that a woman who finds her strength is unstoppable.